welcome to the plenary session on Big Data, Smart Data. I'm Barbara Nasto, and I'll be moderating the session today. And I'm going to borrow a page from the chemistry industry of the 1960s and dub this session Better Healthcare Through Big Data. And I'm going to say it again because I want the power of that statement to resonate. Better healthcare from big data. Now, we live in the information age now, long way from the 1960s. Big data is here, and we love it. It tells us what to buy, where to go, and it can even guide us in choosing a life partner. So I don't think there is any question that big data will impact life science, and it has the potential to greatly alter the way the world practices healthcare. So I think the real questions are, how do we best use big data to make better decisions, to optimize our resources, and cast a broader net on the world's ills? It's a pretty big objective. And what are the obstacles of making this a reality? How do we collect data? How do we manage and apply it? What questions do we address? And how do we do it wisely? How do we turn this glut of data that is available to us into smart data? So, do we need to bring the public along? I think these are obvious questions. Do we need to convince the politicians? Well, to quote one of our speakers that is probably the first person, that is the person that's going to speak, we need to walk before we run. And I'm sorry that I stole that from you. There are a few smart things that big data is already doing, and we're going to get the global view from two very disparate perspectives on the use of big data in healthcare. Our first presenter will be Ashley Moore, who is at Wilmore. Ashley Wilmore works for IMS Health in the Real World Evidence Group. Now, it's a pretty tall order. However, I'm going to let him speak for himself on what value this can bring to the life sciences and the practice of healthcare in the world. Yes, sir? Michelle, I'd like to invite you up as well at this point.
Can you hear me? Yes? Thank you. I'm going to use a few slides. Before I do so, one of the reasons why I came today and was very grateful for the offer to come and speak to you, I really like the title, Big Data, Smart Data. I think where we are in this process is really this transition from being awash with data to figuring out how to use it better, and how to get somewhere smarter. And in fact, one of the reasons why I joined IMS at all was because from the outside perspective, this was a company that was leading in terms of this transformation from big data to smart data. And partly what I do for IMS Health internally is to say, okay, how do we actually get better at this? What are some of the next steps that we need to take in terms of making sure that we have access to the sorts of data and the requirements that our clients are making of us, so that they in turn can put data to work for the benefit either of the life sciences industry or the healthcare industry. So there were really just three things that we were going to talk about. So I come first. I'm the one who gets to do the definitions. So I'll just show you one slide in terms of at least what's our definition of big data in healthcare. Then I'll go on to just touch very briefly on the distinction between the ambition that we have for the use of these data and where I think we are today. And one of the observations, as Barbara was just saying, is, well, to a certain extent, are we trying to run before we can walk? My personal point of view is there are tremendous sources of value that are currently going untapped because we haven't put in place some of the infrastructure that we need to really make use of these data. And I think to a certain extent, there are some barriers to its use, and some of those are definitional. So if we get cracking in terms of real-world data sources, where we get very excited, and I'll come back to that on the next slide, is electronic data. So the world of real-world evidence and real-world data in healthcare, not particularly new. We have issues around observational studies, non-interventional studies, drug utilization studies. Where we get much more excited is when those data become electronic, because that gives us a massive uplift in terms of the scale and the rapidity at which we can use them. And part of our overall strategy, to be very simple about it, is do we genuinely have the right feedback loops in our healthcare systems that allow us to learn rapidly about healthcare interventions, the impacts of policy, the impacts of introduction of new medicines? And the answer, for me at least, at the time being, is no. So centerpiece in this, electronic data. Why are we excited about that? Well, we're moving really from a world of primary data collection, which was expensive, it was very time-consuming, it was very static, and it was relatively small scale. So in the previous session, we heard about trials of 20,000 people. Well, that's pretty much the top end. I think we're much more familiar with trials of a couple of thousand people. What we're interested in is, can we create data sets where we have millions of people, and that we can leave them switched on, and that we can get dynamic access to those data so we can see what's happening continuously with systems which have very low marginal cost and which are very large in scale. And that's where we get very excited. So the role that IMS plays, to a certain extent, is an information intermediary. And when I say, are we running before we can walk, so clients come to us and they think that it's like this. They think they can ask us for an evidence generation thing that is already built, that they can access whenever they need to, and that it's high quality, and that it's quick. And I actually think that we're here. I think we're still very much at the beginning with all of this. And the work that we do is going around hospital to hospital, signing up people, negotiating information governance, negotiating data privacy, getting access to data in a way that is ethical, acceptable to the data owners themselves, in line with information governance. And this is literally a piecemeal task. And things like, the market for data is still absolutely in its infancy. So maybe a little bit of a kind of a negative point of view, but I think there are 3 ideas I wanted to share with you about how we can navigate this transition from there being copious amounts of data to really getting access to the data that we need and that we want to put it to use. So the 3 ideas are, let's just be super clear about purpose. Let's acknowledge that there are some relatively simple rules about data, and I'll just share with you parting thoughts in terms of what are some of the existing hurdles. So hopefully you can read that slide okay. It's a 2x2 matrix, and I think what we're saying on the left-hand side here is be incredibly clear about the purpose. What is it you want to do with these data? And this comes from, relatively sort of traditional thinking around data and decision-making, 2 basic types, decision-making data and data for surveillance. And those have 2 very different implications in terms of how we need to think about the data that we need and what we can do with it. And then we have the second axis, which is, well, what is the unit of analysis? Who are we actually talking about? Are we talking about making a decision about an individual patient, or are we actually talking about making decisions around an entire population? So if we go very quickly through those 4 cells, a lot of what I hear and a lot of what people get very excited about, translational medicine, leveraging electronic medical records, clinical decision support, how do we actually make better decisions as healthcare agents to the patient that we have in front of us? I also hear people get very excited about things like wearables, surveillance to a certain extent. I think it's great, it has its place, but where we get really excited is, again, top right-hand corner. So how can we put together data sets at the level of the entire population to facilitate informed and targeted change in terms of how healthcare resources are actually being deployed today, and how can we make those changes? And I think here we're talking about tech-enabled, linked at source, comprehensive data sets that tells us about how patients are using care, not just at a single point in time, but between primary care and secondary care and tertiary care.
Ashley, can I ask you a question? What do you think we need to do to put that into place? I mean, that to me sounds like you have to get a government body to, write a check. Because I'm guessing IMSF is a private company, so, your clients are what? Pharmaceutical industry,
Yep.
Healthcare delivery agencies. Unless the questions are coming from a higher objective, isn't that always going to be a limit on what big data can do?
I think more and more, and as I was saying, I think the interesting thing is that the title of this is not just about, let's talk about big data, but let's actually recognize that there is this transition that we need to go from the abundance of data to data that actually allows us to make decisions. This notion of disentangling between surveillance data and decision-making data, again, I think is very important. So a lot of the national data sets and a lot of the national initiatives are more in the bottom right-hand corner. So treatment registries, data sets which take a long time to validate, take a long time to publish, so that you can look at national level data, except it's 18 months to 2 years out of date. It's not timely enough for us to achieve the objective of getting fast feedback into the system. So to answer your question, yes, I think there is a role for us to build things like this. So T-shaped data, which is one of the things which, as IMS, we're keen to move forwards with, is to say, there is a trade-off, and if we recognize the trade-off when we're actually doing the construction and when we're setting our objectives about building the infrastructure, we can do one of two things. So we can either say, let's be very clear that what we're trying to build national data sets for which we cover almost the entire population, but the trade-off is very thin data, so relatively clinically thin, so we don't know everything about everybody. Or can we build stems, so these deep stem networks, where you make the investment, private companies, the state, collaborations, we're seeing the emergence of much more collaborative type models, where in selected geographies or using selected centers, you are making that investment in the infrastructure so that the data can be extracted, the quality of the data can be improved, that you can demonstrate to the people who are sharing their data, providing access with the data, how it's being used. They can use that for their own clinical benefit as well, and trying to create a much more synergistic relationship. So I do think, I mean, it is on the agenda. We do need to make these investments in infrastructure for this to become a reality. I'm conscious of time.
Yeah,
I'm just going to share
conscious of the time as well.
maybe one last thought with you,
Okay.
which is, well, what are some of the hurdles? So I think, particularly when we're talking about life sciences or even agencies who want access to the data, first one is lack of anticipation. So assuming that online 24 hours, always switched on portal exists, it doesn't. The market for data is currently quite immature, and not anticipating the 18 months it takes to build the relationships, to understand the data, to get it into the state that you need it to, is one of the key hurdles. Absence of scale. So we're seeing very fragmented efforts. These are big initiatives. The funding is substantial, but I think the reward of doing it is colossal. And the third one is more of a change in mindset, which is, particularly if we're talking about evidence-based medicine in life sciences, we've all gone through that evolution over the last 20 years of evidence-based medicine. The predominant mindset is of a study with a hypothesis and the data collection period, the analytical period. I think we need to embrace and move away from that, because the sorts of flows of electronic data that we're talking about allow us to move away, and I was talking to somebody last night about this, it's like moving away from photographs and moving to cinema. You're moving away from snapshots in time to something which is genuinely dynamic, and I think once we've tasted that and we've got the hang of that, we'll look back at much more static approaches and find them strange.
Do you think the idea of a real-world evidence perspective, I mean, is the digi-age going to help this in any way? Are your little devices on your iPhone? I mean, I think there's something to come later on in the session that might speak to that point. But do you see, you know, in the changing age where apps are something that have a role to play in everything we do?
Yep.
Do you see this as something
I
that's
absolutely do.
Yeah?
And so the slide I showed of the 2x2 wasn't to say that there is a better or a worse, just to say, let's just be really clear about which bit of the puzzle we're trying to address. We think that there is huge untapped value in that top right-hand corner around making changes, policy-driven around healthcare resources are used and deployed. I think the bottom left-hand corner, so surveillance of individuals, a fascinating area, will transform the relationship between patients and physicians and clinicians. So I think there is a place for all four of those pieces, but where we're sort of placing the biggest bet, if you like, is evidence-based healthcare as the next step on from evidence-based medicine. And in order to do that, we need a measurement technology that allows us to actually understand what we are doing in healthcare and to get that feedback promptly so we can make informed choices.
And how long are we away from being there?
5 years.
Yeah. Okay. So, if you don't mind, I'd like to now invite Michel Bergeron from the University of Laval to the stage. Now, Michel has a very different perspective because he has a clinician's perspective, and he's actually asked the question, can big data curtail the threat of microbial resistance? And so I now give the floor to Michel and ask you to please join me at the table.
I lost my,
Yeah.
my thing. I think I'll use a microphone instead because it fell, unless...
Well, you are coming through.
Yeah.
Well, I'll put it here. Good night, ladies and gentlemen. It's a pleasure to be here. I love Lyon, not only for food, but I love it because it's a bastion of microbiology and also of medicine. There's not a city in the world that has so many names of doctors. So I'm a physician, and I'm an infectious disease specialist. I started my practice as an infectious disease specialist in 1974. And in 1985, I woke up with a dream. How is that? Because I'm also a microbiologist. Why can't we identify microbes using, cultures and other ways in less than 2 days while we've walked on the moon, in fact, in '69? And I've been working on antibiotic resistance and also pharmacology all those years. And I've decided to move in the diagnostic field because I knew if we would use DNA, maybe we could solve the problem. I've entitled my talk From Pasteur to the Genome, the Molecular Diagnostic Revolution. During the last 30 years, especially in microbial genomics, there have been millions and trillions of data that accumulated and brought us to a new era of molecular diagnostics. A lot of big data. But in reality, what I'll show you is that when you ask a clinical question and you say you're going to use DNA, you can build up your big data for a specific purpose. And as you will see, we've used horizontal genomics instead of vertical genomics. And this has resulted in fantastic, fantastic diagnostic tools that are sold throughout the world right now. But first, I want to show you or remind you that the microbial world is big data. Microbes have survived and evolved during 4.2 billion years. Microbes represent 60% of Earth biomass. That's a lot of cells. In our gut microbiota, there are more microbes than stars in our galaxy. Remember microbiota, microbiome, resistome? This is the future of medicine. I won't talk about it today, but we're working this area also. In my mind, this is where it's going to happen in the last 100 years, because it's going to take 100 years to study this. There are 1,600 microbes that cause infectious disease, but only 100 of them really cause about 80% of the diseases. Thousands of microbes has now been sequenced. In reality, 36,000. Pathogens now have evolved extreme resistance to antibiotics. You've heard in the last few talks in the previous session that resistance is #1 problem for WHO, for Europe, for United States. Even President Obama has a special program on that. And you will see antibiotic resistance can become cured with rapid diagnostics. Infectious disease is still the first cause of mortality, about 30% of all death. And infectious disease require rapid diagnostics. You know it when you get flu, get sick. You would love to know if it's flu or other things.
Michelle,
Yes.
could you speak a bit more directly to the interdisciplinary team
Yes.
that you needed to assemble
Sure. Be
to
happy
bring?
to.
I mean, I think we can stress the importance of the fact that, you know, being able to diagnose an array of, you know, what specific microbe is attacking somebody within an hour
Exactly.
will have a huge benefit.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So just to
But if you could tell us, you know, because you've been at this for what, 30 years?
30 years right now.
Yeah.
And it started, I was alone as a clinician with my team working on pharmacology, toxicology. And then I decided, I had a friend I was working with resistance, Paul H. Roy, who was a fantastic basic microbiologist. And I said, I've got this dream. Could you come with me? And now we have a transdisciplinary team, as you will see at the end. We even have engineers, we have physicists, we have chemists, biologists, people from industry, but they're part of the research team, but they're no string attached. They want to be with us, okay? And so plastic people, as you will see. So this, I think, what made our success is really because we got all of these people whom I convinced that my dream should be theirs. It didn't take long to convince them, and that's what happened. So if you look here on this slide, Pasteur microbiology, extremely slow, 2 to several weeks, and that was the basis for but there are consequences in reality of slow diagnostics, imprecise diagnosis, empirical treatment, abusive use of antibiotics and antimicrobial resistance. They're all connected. Overuse of antibiotic and resistance, it's a use of broad spectrum, so there's a very close relation. And hospital-acquired infections are secondary to overuse of antibiotics, there's no question. Increased death, poor control epidemics, slow intervention for bioterrorist attack, and high healthcare costs. So many consequences of slow diagnostic. So I had this dream, and look at Pasteur smiling when he sees DNA. I'm sure if he would live today, he would be really, really working on DNA. So that was my dream at that time, and I'm pushing it, and I'm still pushing it. Now, in '85, you know, developing DNA-based tests posed many, many challenges. First, sample prep to extract DNA, lyse the cell. I won't talk too much about that, but that's very important. Proper molecular strategy. There were few available DNA sequences in 1985. Everybody was working on ribosomal RNA. For me as a clinician, I need to know if it's a Staphylococcus, not only the genus. I wanted to distinguish it from aureus and epidermidis, etc. So this is why we dream at that time of finding and discovering new genes that in reality will have different degree of conservation. So we could go from family to genus and species. And that's what we did. We discovered 3 genes, TUF, ATPD, and RECA, and this really was very useful. And remember, in 1985, for those who are old enough, that there were no commercially available PCR. PCR discovered 2 years before by Carey Mullis. So it's only in the 90s where PCR and then real-time PCR at the end of the 90s appear, and then practical sequencing. And I'll talk a little bit about this.
Okay. I'm going to ask you to skip to defining exactly what your diagnostic does and how it's going to change the way that clinicians practice medicine and what it's done to the University of Quebec Hospital, what you've seen.
Yeah, it's coming, but I could summarize it if you want.
Well, I just think that your slides are not as quick as you're saying, and we are running long on time. So,
Okay.
They're not very quick, actually.
Okay.
I'm
So
sorry to point
That's
that out.
okay. That's okay. That's okay. That's part of the debate.
Yeah.
So we've developed really genomics of cancer genes, and what you can see here, the center is phylogenetic tree, goes from top to the bottom. And on the left, on your right, no, on your left, sorry about that. On your left, you see Maurice Boissineau holding a patent, a 1,500 pages patent, which has all the primers and probes necessary to identify 450 bacteria. And this resulted, here you go, resulted in very important tests. One for group B streptococci in pregnant women at delivery to prevent meningitis in kids, and then MRSA, methicillin-resistant Staph aureus, C. difficile, and other tests, which really has transformed the practice of medicine. The clinical impact of these tests, that's what you're asking, is seen on this next slide. I'm just looking at one of these tests, the methicillin-resistant Staph aureus, which was a revolution because we're the first in the world to demonstrate we could identify microbe directly from a clinical sample in less than 1 hour. In fact, half an hour to 3/4 an hour. So it reduced MRSA transmission. It reduced infections due to MRSA, surgical infections, bloodstream infection, decreased death. In one hospital during 4 years, they've used our test. 72 deaths in 4 years and 8.8 million. One test, just imagine. And it lowered the turnaround time on number of isolation days in hospital, which is very important because these bugs are very contaminated and it saves costs at the same time. And the economic impact is there. You can see I created a company, IDI, Infectious Diagnostic Incorporated, was bought by Becton Dickinson in 2006. And you see the fabrication center that they built in 2008 and the R&D center in 2007. They've invested $800 million in Quebec City. There's 350 highly qualified jobs. And finally, our products are sold in 50 countries. It's slow, huh?
So, Michelle, I'd like to invite you to the table because I think there is, even though these are disparate views, come have a seat.
Yes, but I want to finish with this one.
Oh, okay.
Let me finish this one, Barbara, because
I'm so sorry.
This summarized
microfluidics is
this summarized 30 years of work. Mm-hmm. And on the first, what you see here is culture standard. So we got slow healthcare decision, more than 48 hours. In the middle, you got our tests that we have developed that are in laboratories, goes from 1 hour, 24 hours. Why? Because labs are centralized. Because they're centralized in one city or in one hospital, and the diagnostic cycle is very slow from prescription to the results. So while these tests can be done in 1 hour, the results comes back in more than 24. And what we're working on right now is the future. I call it the Nespresso of genomics. You see it on this slide. It's a microfluidic device. You can see it. Instead of having grains of coffee, we have grains of DNA. It does sample preparation. It does dilution. And you can read. It's real-time PCR with a very small apparatus. And I think this is the future of the practice of medicine. And here is the transdisciplinary team. Numbers do not talk by themselves, but to make practical sense of big data, we need this team that I've been working with for many years. Thank you for those people who've been working many years with me and believing in my vision.
Thank you, Michelle. So I was wondering if each of you might comment, because I do see that there is a parallel, even though you're coming from a much different perspective than you are as the clinician, of getting the clinician to change the way they practice medicine. So I mean, would you perhaps comment on how to create a cultural shift? And I would ask you kind of a similar question as to why isn't every hospital lab doing this, you know, looking at your numbers? So first, Ashley?
So maybe just a quick reflection on the presentation that we've seen. I think that there is this necessary synergy, connection between innovation and new interventions in healthcare and our ability to figure out if they work. And I was minded by one of the slides that was shown where we were saying, okay, well, we introduced this and we reduced infections and we reduced hospitalizations and we reduced death. So I think there's this very sort of complementary thing that we're saying, which is on the one hand, this is the intervention that we introduce, and what I'm saying is let's build the management and the information technology that allows us to collect and create that evidence in as efficient and as in as seamless a way as possible. So that I'm assuming that when you introduce this into clinic, it then took you 6, 12, 18 months to collect all those other data through some sort of clinical audit about, okay, well, did we really have a clinical impact? And that's the bit that I'm really interested in, but the two must dovetail together. And I think the second part of your question is the really important one, which is scale. So how do we achieve scale and how do we really roll things out? Partly our point of view is that providing feedback to clinicians about what they are doing individually and collectively and the impact that's having on their patients individually and collectively is a missing link. And systematically and universally, every single project that we've done in this space, we start off with a relatively hostile crowd. We get them to accept the fact that the data that we're showing them are their data. And then you get into a constructive dialogue once you've got over the acceptability of the data and the analysis about getting into a change. But that's a process, and I think that the data are integral to that process as part of a change management approach. But I think the real opportunity that we all need to tackle is how do we scale things up.
Interesting. And Michelle?
Well, honestly, it's, I thought, you know, that when we've put the first, had the first test approved by FDA in 2002, that was a Group B step, and 2 years later, the MRSA. I thought that the world will just phone me and say, Michel, this is the best thing after apple pie. But in reality, that's not what happened. It's a change in culture. We've realized it's really a big change in culture, without culture. It's a big shift, 150 years of microbiologist. I'm a microbiologist. I like to smell my bugs and culture. But there's a lot of, it's related to this. So the way the system works, it's the microbiology lab that decides, because the first instruments were in the lab. And interestingly enough, we sold it to BD because we could not penetrate the market with my small company that I created at that time. And so this penetration of market, you needed to push it. Today, we can say that approximately 30% of hospital labs that are, quote, university type, big hospitals, would have these technologies, but not all the tests, you know, they choose, the menu is very important. But the democratization of these tests have not arrived because they're very expensive. It takes technical skills, and you cannot do it yourself unless you know what you're talking about. And that's why we're moving in the other direction, whereby we look at the other group of labs which don't have the expertise, and that's why point-of-care DNA-based tests will be very popular. But in fact, they're selling hundreds of millions of dollars a year, but the market is 10 to 12 billion, so they've touched probably 10 or 15% of the market. And I think there's really this change of mentality. The microbiologists have to believe in this technology, and they're doing more and more, like I told you, in academic milieu. And the other milieu, they're not doing it because they don't have the skill, they don't know much about DNA.
So I'm going to stop our global view at that point in time. I'm sure we're over time already. And I think we've already touched on our next segment of this session is what is needed to generate smart data. And so I'm going to invite Diane Gosselin, Rebecca Cush, and Guillaume Breslon to the stage. And Diane and Rebecca are going to present a complementary view from two very different perspectives. So if I could invite you to have a seat in the front row. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ashley and Dr. Bergeron. Yeah. So there's you. So I just to take a minute. Now, Rebecca is part of a nonprofit organization that saw the need to harmonize clinical data and the way that you measure disease and within a clinical trial. And Diane works for the Quebec CQDM, and it's a funding agency for innovation within your region or all of Canada?
Across Canada.
Across Canada. So she funds a number of projects. Not all of them are healthcare, but she has actually put some funding into Michelle's project. And
very proud to do so.
Yeah. So I leave you two ladies to.
We'd like to show you to start off this discussion, and it goes back to some of what Ashley was talking about with respect to the feedback loop. So if we could show that slide, what we're doing is taking healthcare data and using it for research, and then the feedback loop from research to go back into clinical decisions is actually reported to take approximately 17 years. So I'm not even sure we're walking yet, but it's unacceptable. And in addition to this, the research studies are getting more and more complicated. They are generating more data, they're starting to use genomic data, and they're growing. And so Diane's going to talk next a little bit about the widening innovation gap that we're seeing.
Yeah, so I agree with you, Becky. I'm not sure we're walking yet. Especially at CQDM, we're concerned about the lack of productivity of the whole discovery process. So it's becoming more and more difficult to put some new drugs on the market, even though we are investing more and more in research. We are not able to come up with some drugs, more drugs approved every year. So CQDM is very concerned about that. It was created with that in mind. So we are trying, our mission is to fund tools that can accelerate the discovery process. So anything that can really facilitate the whole process. CQDM was created initially by three big pharma companies, Merck, Pfizer, and AstraZeneca, together with the Canadian and the Quebec government. And now we are very privileged to have 9 big pharma companies around CQDM. Again, the concept, well, probably you're more familiar with IMIs. CQDM is similar to IMI, and we're very privileged to have the good advices of Michelle Goldman on our board. So CQDM is smaller than IMI. We're focused in Canada, across Canada, and we have a very unique collaborative model where all the big pharma companies are sharing the cost of the research. So it's very important for us because it allows to create a financial leverage up to 25-fold. So because we have that financial leverage, we can afford to work on early stage research, we can de-risk research, and certainly we can work on research that a single pharma organization wouldn't be able to work on. So, yeah, so very important for CQDM from our perspective. If we want to go from big data to smart data, we need to work into a really collaborative way. And we do that at CQDM in many different ways. So first of all, as I mentioned, different big pharma companies who are initially competitors are working together, sharing the cost and the results of the research, but also making sure that academic researchers are going to work with private organizations, biotech companies, and we are funding these public-private partnerships. Now, that's not all. We need to make sure that the pharma industry is going to work in collaboration with these partnerships. So we have a mentorship program where we have mentors from the big pharma companies who are really closely working with our researchers to make sure that our technology is really aligned with the needs of the pharma industry. So what we mean by collaboration is also we need to work into multidiscipline if we want to bring big data from different scale to come up with something that we can use really and that is really aligned with the needs that we're pursuing. Next slide, please. So in CQDM, I don't have time to go too much into details, but we have a portfolio of 35 research projects. So I'm very proud to find Professor Bergeron, who is funded by CQDM, and you certainly did a lot of very nice progress with CQDM funds. But I would like to highlight some of the needs that we have in Alzheimer's disease, because this is a very good example where you have a lot of needs and not too many solutions that are coming up. Alzheimer's disease is a very complex disease, and we at CQDM, we have different ways to approach the problem. So one example is the project on different animal models for Alzheimer's disease. So as you know, we have already on the market a lot of different models. They are not very predictive of what's going on in human. So with this project at Biospective, which is a CRO based in Montreal, together with Pfizer and Merck, what we are developing is an imaging tool that allow, first of all, to characterize in depth the different models, models that are being developed by Merck and Pfizer. And so it's really nice, but we need to make sure that we have some ways to compare the results that we are generating. So with that specific tool, we are able to quantify the evolution of different biomarkers in time and compare, within different animals and within different models. So at the end, we can come up, we're probably going to end up with different models that we can use together to see the evolution or the efficacy of a treatment. So that's one example, a multidisciplinary approach and a very nice interaction between the pharma industry and a biotech company. Now, the second example is about more clinical data. So, of course, in Alzheimer's disease, what we need is early diagnosis, first of all, and we need also to be able to predict response to treatment. So with this project led by Richard Hogg at University of Montreal, we are looking at different aspects of how can we bring different biomarkers into one single diagnosis. In this project, we are looking at the MRI results that we are combining with already existing biomarkers and clinical data to make sure that we're going to come up with something extremely predictive. Now, I don't want to go too much into the details, and I want Becky to maybe show us another aspect of smart data.
Sure. Thank you, Diane. So my organization is called CDIS, Clinical Data Interchange Standards Consortium, which is quite a mouthful, but we started in 1997 as a totally volunteer group and incorporated as a nonprofit in 2000. And we now have 364, I believe it is, organizational members from all different types, academia, pharma, technology providers, and CROs make up the bulk of them. And we started by trying to figure out how to create data standards that would allow us to exchange data better. And we now have a suite of data standards. We initially started with trying to provide data to the Food and Drug Administration because all of their data was coming in paper, and their organization was becoming what was called a fire hazard, and they needed to get electronic data into their shop, and they wanted it in a standard format that would provide a way for them to use standardized tools to do the analyses. That is the back end of the process. Then we started also with a number of standards that will help generate that data and collect that data in a standard format. And I'll cut to the chase and say if these standards are used upstream, they're of the most value, and they add quality to the data as well as decreasing time and cost to the projects. So we say that standards bring order to complexity, and CDISC is actually becoming a global language for clinical research. So I'm going to give you an example because we don't use any data and we don't generate data. We're just trying to enable the exchange of that data. And one of our partners, the Critical Path Institute, started a coalition against major diseases, and they decided to begin with Alzheimer's disease. So I'm picking up the thread from Diane and saying, what are we doing to enable us to find treatments for Alzheimer's disease? And the Critical Path Institute approached a number of pharmaceutical companies who had failed trials, and their trials were done with a couple of hundred patients, and they said, what would happen if we could aggregate all these data into one database and start looking at a bigger amount of data? But they ran into this problem that you see on the slide here. Every one of them was collecting the data in a different way, in a different format. And one of the very standard tools, one of the questionnaires to assess cognition in Alzheimer's patients, was being used by each company in a different format. They were collecting the data in different sequences, and the data could not be aggregated. So they said, we need a standard, and we need to aggregate these data and map it into that standard. And so that's what they did, and they chose CDISC, and they got most of the data from the studies into the CDISC standard, but then the Alzheimer's-specific data is where we collaborated with them and came up with a new standard. So they were then able to aggregate initially 4,000 patients worth of data. It's now up to 6,000. The database is open. It's open and available for researchers to use, and they started being able to do some progression modeling that you see up here. And this is a quote from one of the people at CPath about how using the standards helped them get to the insights in a quicker way. So this is just one example in the field, again, of Alzheimer's, of where standards can help. And I'll close my presentation by just saying we now have a suite of standards that work for all clinical trials, and they're being used globally to go from protocol through data collection, through the analysis, and the reporting. And these standards are common across clinical trials like demographics and adverse event reporting, and we're now starting to add the disease-specific standards to that through a group we call Coalition for Accelerating Standards and Therapies, and it's a partnership with the Critical Path Institute. We also have some standards that help us bridge back into healthcare. So that's what we're doing to try to accelerate that cycle that we showed you at the beginning of this presentation.
Well, I invite you to have a seat. Now, I have a question for each of you. Come have a seat. The collaborative approach that is so important to how difficult is that to orchestrate within the pharmaceutical community? When you say you have 3 companies that are kind of, you know,
we have 9 now. 9. Yes. So I guess that, first of all, we need to make sure that we create a climate of confidence, because, as I mentioned, these are competitors. So we need to create an environment where we don't want to compete. We see the value of working together. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, with these tools, pharma companies are going to use these tools and then eventually compete with using the same tool but on different molecules. So the point is to really create a climate where we can create benefit for different pharma companies, first of all, but certainly also, and very importantly, to create benefits for all the stakeholders. So academic institution, private organization, and the pharma industry as well.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the point here. We need to probably understand each side and make sure that what we are going to do is going to collectively create benefits.
Mm-hmm. And Rebecca, we were talking before about this wonderful Alzheimer's unification way of presenting the clinical data. Are pharma companies embracing this? Are they using it optimally, or, you know?
So we've had these standards being generated over the past 15 years, and a number of the pharmaceutical companies are participating in their use. And they use them in varying ways. And we just did an analysis of adoption with the Tufts Center for Drug Development. And unfortunately, there are still too many companies using them at the very, what I call the back end, where they collect all the data and then they map it into that standard. And that's a problem because it takes extra time, it takes extra money, and you can never get the data to quite fit into the standard. So we keep proposing, and so do people at FDA, including their statisticians, collect the data in that format in the beginning, and it'll flow downstream, and it's been shown to actually, you can start up a study in 70 to 90% less time when you use the standards in the startup stage of the study. So the Tufts study showed that about 90% of the pharmas are using the data at the back end and 20 to 30 at the front end, 20 to 30%.
Interesting. Okay, so
they are now going to be required to submit in that format, so I keep proposing that they try to save money and start by at least collecting the initial core data with a standard format.
which it's, I mean, given having done some work in medical affairs, we spend a lot of time, even at its inception of a drug, you know, scripting key messaging and how you're going to discuss it. I mean, I would think the idea of how you're going to measure it and how you're going to compare it to what other companies are doing would also be something that you would, you know, be in the discussion.
And that's starting, and that's actually where the EMA is, the European Medicines Agency, because they want to increase transparency. So they are requiring now that trials be registered when they start and that data be shared at the end. And a lot of that's being shared in summary results, and so you can use some of the standard analysis data sets to show those summary data.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think you emphasize that we still have some hills to climb to make data smart. So Guillaume Breslon works for INRA, and he is giving us a computational biologist's perspective on big data. And he has some interesting views on the obstacles as well as ways to augment turning big data into smart data.
Okay, thank you, Rebecca. Barbara, sorry. So yeah, I'm not clearly from big data fields. I'm more a computational biologist. And, but I perfectly agree with our first speaker, Ashley, in that in big data we are in the infancy of the field. And we are able to walk or to make a step. Maybe not to walk, actually. We are not able to run. We want to run. And if we want to run, we have to be very careful not to run in the wrong directions. And in my talk, I will try to put the focus on, for me, the three main mistakes we may do if we run in big data. And the first one is actually, if it works, this one. Very classical, volume, velocity, variety, volume, velocity, variety, etc. And this is the first big mistake. Focus too much on the data. If we want to progress in big data, we need to forget first the volume, the variety, and all these characteristics of our data, because this is not the point in healthcare. This is a question, this is a problem for computer scientists. This is not a problem for us. And actually, if you look at the data we have now in these domains, in the domain of healthcare, they are not so big. If you look at what the data we have in computer science, sorry, it's a little bit, Okay, this one, for instance, well, many tweets, many pages on Facebook, etc. The volumes in healthcare are smaller than these ones. So this is not the point. So what is the point if we consider big data in healthcare? The point is that we have to keep in mind that if we use data in healthcare, then we are immediately in an interdisciplinary debate. Okay? And we need immediately to cross disciplines, to melt computer scientists, statisticians, mathematicians, biologists, of course, physicians, physicists. All these topics must talk one with the others if we want to work with big data. And if we have to talk in an interdisciplinary way of big data, then the definition of volume velocity is useless. The true definition of big data, at least for me, if we are in an interdisciplinary perspective, is simply data for which we don't have the methods on the shelves. But the method to do what? And this is the main question. If we want to start running with big data, we have first to understand precisely what we want to do with our data. It's easy to collect data. It's difficult to collect them in a standard way. I perfectly agree with that. But it's more difficult to standardize data than to collect them. So what we have to do first is having a purpose. And of course, the main purpose is to take care of the patient, to cure them, to prevent them to develop diseases. I don't know, many of these purposes. But these are not purposes we can express in terms of data. So we have to link the purpose with the data, and then we will be able to develop the field. This is, I think, the first mistake. I would say, don't listen to computer scientists. Sorry for the next two speakers. Or don't listen only to computer scientists. The second mistake, according to me, is this one. We have this naive view, or some of us, or some have this naive view of big data being what I call the Pasteurtomics. Okay, we will gather many data on the patients, and then we will be able to cure the patient. Okay, this is naive. Why? But why is this naive? Because data will never give you a way to cure the patient if you have the data on the patient alone. What you need is that you need some regularities in the data to be able to decide something from the data. And if you have this simple scheme, where are the regularities? They have to come in this scheme from the outside. And the main way to have them, of course, is to introduce in this scheme cohorts of patients. And with these cohorts of patients, we will be able to find regularities. But this has strong consequences. In that, if you look at the bottom of my slide, you cannot do personalized medicine anymore. Because what you will do is simply find other patients in your database that have the same disease, the same symptoms, similar symptoms, and try to cure your patient in the same way. But what if you don't have the patient in your database? Or what if you have the patient with an old data format? What if you have the same patient but with an old way of acquiring your data? You have to keep in mind that the way we acquire data evolves faster than the way we are able to cure the patients. So this is clearly a big problem, standardization, because we need to standardize what I have at the bottom left of my slide, given the fact that part of these patients, for data on these patients have been acquired with different technologies, with different levels of errors, with different levels of precisions. How can we extract regularities from that? But what now if we want to go back to personalized medicine? We not only need cohorts of patients, we need other things. We need to understand what occurs in this patient. We need to understand the disease. We need to understand the patient. And so actually what we need for big data is not only data. It's something more important, at least to me. It's science. What we need is to be able to understand the disease, to understand the patient, again, and then to be able to see, okay, what is the consequences of the data I collect on the patient at the level of understanding, not at the level of deciding. And then with this scientific knowledge, that of course you can extract from big data, then we will be able to go further and to go better in the direction of personalized medicine. So of course it doesn't mean that big data is useless. Big data is extremely useful, but it is useful if you use it to develop knowledge first and then to apply knowledge in a second step. Now, my last point, and probably the last mistake according to me, is what kind of science we can do with big data. And there is a big risks there. The big risk is actually the, quite slow, yeah. So the big risk is that computer science, okay, is slow. The big risk is this one. What do I want to express on this slide? Big data focus on molecular level, mainly actually. And this is a risk because we change the way we are looking to the organisms. And if we collect many data at the molecular level, we don't collect data on the whole organism. We are not able to understand the whole organism at the molecular level. And this is something very important, and this is a big risk of big data, changing not only the way we look at the patient, but the way we try to understand the patient, and making us running in a, for me, clearly wrong direction. The direction of only molecular view on the patients, on the organisms, on bacteria, for instance. So what we have to do is we have to collect data, but not only at the molecular level. At all the levels of organization of a living being, be it the patients, be it the pathogens, I don't know. But globally, and I took this slide from Evelyn Fox-Keller, which is a philosopher I really like, living beings looks like this slide more than the previous one. We can discuss a lot on why they look like this slide, why they look like this figure. But for me, the reason is that it's because they have not been engineered. They have evolved. And evolution creates things simply by trials and error. So if, I don't know, the shoe here has a good action on the human, on the organism, then it will select the shoe or any other part of this system. And we have to understand this biological system at this level, at the global level, and at the molecular level. I don't want to say that molecular level is useless. Again, molecular level and molecular biology is extremely useful, but it will be dangerous if it makes us forget the other levels of organization. And big data today have all the tools to collect lots of data, but only at the molecular level. It's much more difficult to collect data at the other levels, or it's much more difficult to call them big data. So just forget big data. Big data orients us toward molecules. Just speak of data. And data will cover all the range of organization of molecular beings. Thank you.
Well, thank you. So I'm relieved that big data is not the death of personalized medicine. But also as a physiologist, I think I would like to emphasize and maybe ask any of the panelists to comment on being able to take that broader view, that more holistic view of the person that is being treated and how healthcare is being practiced. Anyone care to comment?
Yeah, I agree entirely that it is important to get many different levels of data analysis. One of the really key things is identifying complex phenotypes that are themselves enormously integrative. And a really terrific one is heartbeat variability, because what that assesses for you, and what I mean by that is your heartbeats are irregular if you measure them very, very carefully. A lot of variability in heartbeat is very, very good. Very little variability is very bad. And what heartbeat variability does is synthesize and integrate what the parasympathetic system is doing as opposed to the sympathetic system. So you're integrating together at a very high level very complex systems. And my argument has always been we'd like to have 50 complex phenotypes like that that could take us not just at the level of clinical chemistries or metabolites in the blood, but could really be assessing the systems themselves and how they operate in the organism. And I'm sure as time goes on, we'll come to understand many of these complex aspects of phenotype. And others do exist now, and it's going to be very important to interrogate them.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm going to wrap up our what's needed aspect of the session, and then ask our speakers to have a seat, and invite up Nicholas Roloff from Dassault Systems and Pascal Sampé from IBM. Now, this is our enterprise part of the session, and we're going to discuss some solutions that are already on the shelf. And we're going to begin with Dassault Systems, and I'm going to give the floor to Nicholas.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
So I'm going to show you a few slides of what Dassault System is doing. Is it showing up? Okay. All right. So Dassault System, so what do we provide? So we are, I would say, more a scientific company than a software company. So we are not computational biologists. We are more scientists, and we work with the scientists. And our mission is to provide virtual world, so as to, and virtual universes, and virtual experience to offer solutions to a wide ecosystem of industries, public institutes, and all biotech CROs that are involved in the life sciences and healthcare activities, so that to help design better products, solutions for the real world. So we're now about 40,000 people. We have more than about 2,000 customers today in all industries. Of course, we are well known for serving the aero industry because we started from Dassault Aviation, but now we're an independent company, and we serve and we extend what we've developed with the aero industries and aero R&D to automotive to now serve 12 industries, 12 different sectors of activities. We also provide a collaborative environment, which we don't do by ourselves, but we also with an extended ecosystem of partners, software ISVs, independent software vendors, but also partners as companies. Our companies are partners of Dassault System, as well as research institutes and regulatory agencies, of course. It is long-term driven. So what we've been doing for more than 30 years is managing complexity for people and business. For example, we are managing extremely complex objects, such as an airplane. An airplane is about 4 million objects. It is life-cycled, it is versioned, it is revised. And what we offer for the aerospace industry is, as I said, a virtual world, a collaborative environment. And we use the 3D here not only to represent the object that has to be developed, but also as a collaborative environment where all disciplines can meet and agree on the object. And here, the 3D is a good representation because you can actually have an environment where designers, engineers, manufacturers, scientists can all work on the same mock-up, I would say, on the same 3D large object, and collaborate end-to-end from the initial idea up to the commercialization and the certification of the airplane. The same with Toyota. Toyota is a big customer of Dassault Systèmes. For Toyota, we not only provide the digital product, but also the digital manufacturing, the digital factory, the modeling of the interior manufacturing of the car. And so, just to say that this is our, I mean, we manage not only big data, but complexity.
I just want to point
yes.
out, though, you are a software company that actually saw an opportunity in life sciences, did you not? Like,
yes,
yeah,
yes.
Like, at one point, did that become apparent in your company? And I imagine you're going to go into some of the steps you've taken to
Yes.
become proficient in the life sciences.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So actually our purpose, and that was a strategy that was actually taken back in 2006 by our CEO, is to address not only the product sphere, but also the impact of the products on the environment and on the biosphere, on the living systems, and to provide a collaborative platform for multidiscipline scientific innovation, connecting the dots between all aspects, all types of data that are produced, all information, be it non-structured, be it social, or be it structured, and to have this in an integrative environment with secured access so that all stakeholders, companies, CROs, biotechs, institutes can collaborate, share, but also choose what intellectual property they want to share and they want to collaborate upon. And here is the complexity. So it's not only the complexity of the product that we address, but we're also addressing the complexity of the pipelines, the complexity of the ecosystem. Now, the entire value chain for patient care, from manufacturer to healthcare, is involving several actors. Of course, pharmaceutical companies play a major role. But as you can see, from research to development to manufacturing, distribution, and down to patient care and the healthcare system, they are outsourcing more and more. It means that the ecosystem around pharma companies is growing more and more, and the value chain is shared more and more between all these actors, for example, in research. And that's something that is new, actually, that we observe, is that research was the core of the IP that was invented within pharma companies, but now they are also outsourcing research because they understand that it is even more interesting to leverage innovation outside the company by securing the IP instead of doing it only in the walls of the company. So I will be very fast. And what was the opportunity to get there? I mean, of course, there is the attrition and the innovation productivity that is problematic for all the life sciences industry. Also something that was striking to us, we're addressing R&D in all sectors. And pharma is spending more in R&D than the automotive and aerospace companies all taken together. So there is a strong need for innovation and for providing a collaborative environment for innovation for the life sciences sector at large.
Can we just, really? Pharma spending more than the automotive industry?
Sorry?
I said you were saying pharma spending more than the automotive industry.
Yeah, the R&D in the life sciences and in pharma companies taken globally, they spend more. They spend hundreds of billions of dollars every year than the aerospace and the automotive industries all taken together.
Yeah, because I'm guessing the sales of the auto industry supersede the sales of the pharma industry by far.
The sales of pharma companies
Yeah.
are actually, it's a very big market.
Yeah.
It's in thousands of billions of dollars a year.
Yeah.
The life sciences market is growing. Does it mean that it is not only the pharmaceutical companies, but it is also the biotechs, and it is also all the services, all the medical devices, and globally, this market is still growing because there are stronger needs in terms of healthcare today than there was before, because of complex diseases, aging populations, etc., etc. Just to show you how we started in life sciences, and very briefly, we started with a collaboration in research with INSERM. We also initiated the biointelligence program with 5 pharma companies back in 2006 with the G5 members, Servier, Sanofi, Ipsen, Pierre Fabre, and also Bayer Crop Science, and labs from the INSERM and from INRIA to develop a large collaborative program on developing an entire portfolio for modeling, simulation centered around systems biology, multi-scale, from molecules to organs to patients, and also on 2 specific aspects of interest, which is oncology and the safety also of biologics and chemicals. And this consortium was ended last year. It lasted 5 years. It involved more than 600 people, so it was a collaborative consortium. And all this collaboration was done within the platform that was provided by Dassault Systèmes, so as to share and leverage all the social ideas and that among all the contributors to that program. Last year, what we did also, and that is not quite known yet, is that we acquired a leader in bioinformatics, which is Axeris. So now there are about more than 1,000 people at Dassault Systèmes working in life sciences. And our ambition for life sciences is to do what we did for all other sectors, is to cover end-to-end the value chain of the R&D that is done in this ecosystem, to provide a backbone for sharing and managing all the changes in the innovation in terms of products and in terms of new medicines and new services. Also, a scientific platform to do modeling and simulation at large of functional, logical, and physical aspects of systems, and in particular for molecular modeling, simulation, but also for digital clinic of effects of drugs in humans, and the effects of and the safety also on new chemicals and biologics on humans, animals, and on the environment. And also to execute this in the lab with the One Lab solutions, and to monitor the clinical trials, and to improve clinical testing based on, for example, biomarker information that could help personalize the clinical testing.
How long does that take to build from
that will take another 100 years, I would say. But yeah, we started 10 years ago, and also what we learned in this path is that what is smart data for us, and I mean, I think that you all share this vision. Life sciences is generating big data, genomics, as you said, proteomics, all types of molecular data, but also data at the phenotypic level, data at the patient level, at the population level, biobanks. So what you can do first is do a statistical and draw statistical correlations analysis and find hypotheses. But how can you filter all those hypotheses and have a better understanding of what's happening? So that's what we've done in collaboration with pharma partners and partners from INSERM, is that we did systems biology approach to understand possible biomarkers, and through simulation to find which ones are the more likely to be the actionable targets, for example, for new drug design, specifically on, for example, in resistance in breast cancer, for example, or on other types of diseases which are complex, such as diabetes or Alzheimer's.
So some real-world questions in terms of
So basically, that's about it, what I wanted to tell and what we are trying to build with this large ecosystem. Dassault Systems technologies are also behind the ensemble that is provided by the Sanger Institute. We acquired Exalead, which is the French Google, and we are able to index at the internet scale all data and to make them available for, again, patient care purposes. And also we illustrated very recently at the Biointelligence Experience Day on April 8th in front of a panel of executives from the pharma industry and also research people from the INSERM and all research institutes such as Institut Gustave Roussy. What we are able to do now with this platform and with the applications that we have developed in the course of the Biointelligence project.
Well, thank you very much, Nicholas. Very engaging. We have 20 minutes left, and with that 20 minutes, Nicholas is going to join me here at the table, and I'm going to introduce Patrick Sampé from IBM Watson. And IBM, very old name in computing, but they're doing some quite futuristic things. And I leave the floor to you, Patrick, to tell us.
Pascal, but anyway, thanks for this nice introduction. So my name is Pascal Sampé. I work indeed for IBM in France. I'm part of the Watson group, and my point today is to give you a bit of information of what Watson is. I guess some of you may know, but I suspect some may not. So let me just spend a little bit of time trying to explain the basis of what we're speaking about. So Watson, first of all, is also known as cognitive computing. And when you think about cognition, you think about way human beings or animals behave. They when they are in front of a problem, when they have a question they need to answer, they basically capture signals. They evaluate what those signals means in this context, and then they make a decision. So the idea behind cognitive computing is exactly the same. It's basically building a system that can identify signals and be trained to understand what those signals means in this specific context. So the notion of context is very important, and then help you make a decision to do some assessment about what those signals means. So first of all, the key message is that Watson, by definition, is a very new way to design information systems, because traditionally, as you know, we build programs, we build executables that that process a given task in the way we decided it has to be performed. Cognitive computing is very different. It's a set of capabilities that you're training the system. It's really based on machine learning, if you want, or expert training. So there's a little phase that you need to put in a bit of effort, that you need to put the expertise you have into the system, that it understands the context in which you're evolving, and basically the material, the information that you're feeding to the system. Now, the very nice idea behind Watson is also mainly, I would say, to tap in this huge amount of data that you guys are producing all the time is unstructured data. So text, voice, images, video, all that kind of data that is very complicated to deal with, because in fact, for text, you need to read it to understand what's in there. So the idea behind Watson is, can we build a system that can understand a question, a complex question, really understand, when I say understand, is understand the details of this question, especially if you have information about the context. Use this information about the context to make sure you understand clearly what the question is about, and then go deep in this huge amount of data you may have, some millions of documents in some cases, and try to find the best answers that the system could find in there, expose those answers to you. And what Watson does, in fact, it exposes the answers with a level of confidences, but the most important, it gives you the answers and all the underlying evidence that support this answer. So basically, we're speaking here about clearly evidence-based decisions, if you want, because you're asking a question to the system is returning answers and providing you the evidence. So, I mean, it's very neat. You'll see a lot of applications of Watson in many industries, and I really push you to go in YouTube, whatever. There's tons of videos on that, and you'll see where it comes from. It was announced in 2011, and since 2011, we've done a lot of progress in many industries. So think about a system that anybody can ask a question in his language, natural language, that gives you back an answer with evidence. On top of that, because it's based on machine learning, based on the way you use it, and more you use it, better it performs, because it's keep on training. And what it also means, it keeps track of the history of the relationship you had with the system. So basically, it will tune the answer based on this past experience. So, in a way, it's providing you kind of personalized answer.
So
that's
just to back up, what are some of the sources within the life sciences that it's drawing upon for
So,
information?
the sources you would use in life sciences is basically medical publications, scientific publications, reports of any kind. You'll see in a few minutes I'll tell you more about what we're doing now with Watson in a broader space. But today I would say that if you look at the first implementations we've done in healthcare, for instance, some of you may know that we've trained Watson in the area of oncology. And we've done that with some reference hospitals in the US and in some specific cancers. And so that took about a year to train the system to understand what cancer is, what all the language they use, and all the signals that you need to detect, and the meaning they have. All this training took some time. But now, basically, the doctors in, for instance, Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center in New York are using this to provide them guidelines or support evidence or treatment options for their patients. So it's very neat because, in fact, it's taking all what makes your patient so different. And back to the discussions we had before, it's a very personalized questions you're asking to the system, and the system is returning what it thinks the best solution for your patient is. And in this case, it's based on literature, it's based on guidelines, it's based on historical data you may have in the hospital. So that's running, that's already, and even some other hospitals at Memorial are tapping into the system, also working at MD Anderson in the US. And there's many other things you can think of. Everywhere where you have a lot of unstructured data. In pharma, for instance, we have projects in assessing toxicology profile of drugs before they go into preclinical, for instance. Because all of that is, you have a lot of information in what already exists, and all those documents, those clinical trials, those reports. So we were discussing before about the difficulty to capture data. What I'm telling you is already tap in what you have, which is a huge amount of data that is sitting there, and it's very difficult for a human being to deal with. So, for instance, toxicology, I said, pharmacovigilance, of course, comparing clinical trials. I heard earlier today we have projects around that. So, all it's the idea of tell me what's in the data, and if the data is smart enough to understand your question, it can help you find the right answer. So that's what we're doing in the pharma space, for instance. What did I miss? Of course, competitive intelligence and stuff like that. So that's a large thing. And depending on the projects, you will train the system on different data sources, of course.
Yeah. So are you ready to, IBM made a very big announcement.
Oh yeah, that's right. So
recently?
Yeah, so Samir made a very nice introduction. Before in the previous session, I don't know if you noticed, there was this little reference to IBM Watson Health. So yeah, we made a big announcement 2 days ago. We're creating a new business unit for which IBM is it's not something we do every day. It's named Watson Health. And the purpose of Watson Health is basically to bring a number of partners and other companies with us. And for instance, Apple, with whom we have a big partnership, or companies like J&J or Medtronic and many others to come. So they're all joining in an effort to build a big cloud, where we will be able to feed anonymized medical data, clinical data, but mostly, and more interestingly, to better understand what's going on in those patients, also consumer health data, for instance, every kind of data you capture with your mobile devices, or whatever, you go running, or all those applications that produce a lot of data on you. So the idea is to merge all this information, clinical data, environmental data, any kind, think about it, a huge amount of data, genetic data, all this anonymized, so it provides big level of data. Here we're really in big data. And provide this access to those data in an open model where basically the partners can come and build application on it. So first of all, it will serve research, because the idea is to be able to find to better understand what's going on in the patient, because as we said all along this afternoon, patient is just not what his disease tells you, it's also how he lives, how he feeds himself, what kind of exercises, all those kind of external parameters that we now are going to be able to capture, feed them, provide them in the system, and be able to better understand what's going on. So we announced that. We'll see what goes on, but clearly this is very nice, because we're really putting the patient in the middle. all those data available, and we're going to be enriching, for instance, with Apple, we're going to be enriching the health kit or the research kit they're providing. Of course, we're bringing all the knowledge of IBM, historical knowledge around security and cloud and stuff like that. So that's going to be really exciting. And maybe some of you have seen those announcements. I really encourage you to go and look into that, because I think it's a real opportunity for all of us to, to build more knowledge around what's going on in patients.
And, from a public perspective, how do you get them to chip in?
Well, I mean,
I would imagine that if you present it to the public, they'll want to participate. Is that the case, or do you?
I mean, there's no reason why not. I mean, the data, the idea of the data is you need to, all this, and everybody needs this information. It's good individually speaking, because then you'll have an apps, for instance, if you're diabetic, for instance, then you have an apps, not only would it capture your data on glycemia, but it would provide you advices on how, better control your glycemia, or maybe what kind of food you should take, or what kind of exercise you should do. So all those informations, including from the public, are very interesting. So of course, those data are, all the data are anonymized, of course. Okay.
Well, I would imagine some assurance that my privacy is being kept, despite participating in what is a very public.
Yeah, but there's no way you can. You don't know who's the data are, okay, in the system. So of course, then it's another relationship that you may have with other entities that you may provide your applications for. But that's another story. But in this program of this Watson Cloud, if I can call it that way, all the data are not put there in this concept. It's basically, the idea is, we've done a lot around clinical data, and we see all those tremendous information coming from social networks, from mobile devices, and all that kind of stuff. Clearly, there's a lot of information in there that you need to capture for the good of the individual, of course, but of course of all of us better understanding what's going on in those patients.
Yeah. Thank you. So I think we're coming close to the end of our session. We have about, yeah. Yes, you may. Yeah, that was what I was getting to. I actually have a tweet that's in French that I can't decipher, so I'll ask.
Thank you very much. It's been really wonderful hearing directly from you the latest news. I, of course, seen the press release. And we tried Watson, well, at least the public version of it. It's machine learning is beautiful, and it's lots of potential, and new initiatives are great. So the gap that I still see between collecting the data in a cloud and putting machine learning methods train itself to deal with this data is how far it brings us towards understanding. Does it really brings us there yet? The thing is, there are very diverse types of data, clinical data. Currently, it is based mainly on publications and text mining and semantic web technologies. But how do you deal with integrating that, for instance, with the molecular data, clinical data, behavioral data? How far are you there? Because it sounds that everything is solved.
No, it's not magic. I mean, clearly, you don't use the same technologies when you're dealing with unstructured data, like text or voice. Which was basically the first thing we handled with Watson. Then what we're putting in the Watson unit, Watson Health unit, is some pieces of the Watson technology, but also a lot of pieces of our data analytics technology that will handle with those structured data, those molecular data. So it's a combination of multiple technologies that will go in there. And not only ours, because the principle of this open platform is that we expect, companies and whatever entities, they come and provide pieces of development that will help handle those things. And what we need to do in Watson Group is to do this convergence between text, knowledge, insight, expert knowledge in there, and the data, the real data, and see. But I see a lot of value to interpret, structured data. If you have insights from other fluxes of information, that really strengthens a lot the quality of the models you can build. So the idea is really to have a convergence between all those type of data.
Yeah, definitely. I couldn't
Yeah,
agree
clearly,
more.
I mean-
There is a certain discrepancy. Previous speakers were telling about how we are, well, making the first steps, but not running. Well, if I listen to you, we are in a full speed.
Well, we're in full speed, but I mean, the thing is, it's a big ambition to do it, and what we hope is people are going to take up and do that and see the value they have to share all those data. And I think Watson, in a way, or cognitive technologies are very interesting because, first of all, it's a new way to interact with information systems. That's the first thing. I mean, if you think of a patient, who has an application, the fact that he can speak, who type to the system and get an answer, already by itself is huge because it's a completely different way to interact with the system. But I think that the cognitive technologies have the capability to ingest all the expertise of every expert, basically, and give it back. That's the other value. And so there's a way of sharing knowledge, expertise, that is really, really good.
It's definitely a great promise. I just,
Yeah,
look
but
forward
that's
for
what
it
we
to
see.
deliver.
That's what we see in the oncology program, is that the idea was not so much to upskill the experts, but it was to distribute the knowledge of those experts into less expert doctors, so that they could have at least the same level of expertise. So it's also for the patient a guarantee that every doctor has the same level of understanding of suggestions of what he could do. And then, of course, it's his call to decide what he needs to do. But at least is exposed to this knowledge.
Yeah, definitely. Every little step helps.
Yeah.
Okay, Nicholas has a comment as well.
Just an additional comment, and something that is very important for us, I mean, IBM or Dassault System, is the development of standards, because, of course, standard is important to exchange information. What we observe is we observe silos of information, and within companies, between research institutes, so there is this development of standard around CDISC, IDMP now, for experimental data that are produced in the lab very early in research. To my knowledge, there is not yet a standard for this, but we are really looking at it because that's the way we are developing our open collaborative platforms, is to be able to leverage standards, to be open. And the best way to be open is that there is an agreement between all the actors in this life sciences ecosystem on how to represent this information, be it non-structured or structured, and how to share it, and also foster the transparency of the data that is produced within the walls of the pharmaceutical companies, so that the people, the patients, the physicians, everybody in that sector can understand and better develop tools for predicting what's going to happen and how to develop innovative drugs, for example.
Thank you. Any other? We have one other question. Actually, I'll bring it to him. Oh, he's got it.
I mentioned about the hope for IBM Health, Watson Health. Do you expect that you will be able to use unstructured data sitting on social network from where to pick up public information? For example, epidemiology of disease, people talking about it. Is it that machine will be able to do by cognitive?
In a way, we do it already. I mean, we have a partnership with Twitter, for instance, that is aimed for that. So the idea is to use all this knowledge from tweets about what is said, how people express themselves. So this is things that are going to come. I mean, we already implemented. So I'm not saying we haven't yet implemented it really so far in healthcare, but in finance, for instance, or things like that, or e-commerce.
So just IBM thinking in healthcare to create a Facebook face on health for every individual who wants to get into it.
Yeah, I'm not aware that we're going to be doing that, but I'm sure people may do it. And you will have a lot of information anywhere on patient sites, patient groups, and assuming you can access to those information and they're okay to be accessed, I think there's a lot of information you can get out from there. It's very, very important. I mean, those social networks information, those tweets, those whatever, I think are very, very valuable because you can detect very early signals that are not yet expressed by an expert or professional. It's things you can pick up And you can be very smart in analyzing tweets. You know, it's only 140 characters, but there's a lot of things in there.
That's right. I just wanted to share on the expression of this lady mentioned. I think our generation was very conservative. We held our data, we hold on. Even our photographs will be in our albums. But the next generation that we are talking about, they share everything. So I believe not only we will run, we'll fly in a very short time. Because the power of the mass, when it decides, if IBM can only open up a window for millions of people, young people, to provide personal data, which I think Watson Health will eventually do at some point.
Yeah, I would agree on that. I would just say that as a corporation, you have to be very careful on what you do. So I agree that we will be pushed by the market or the people to open more. But it's very important, and the ideas we have between this Watson cloud is the security and the confidentiality of data is very important. So I understand a lot of people are exposing their life on the network. That's fine for them, maybe. But as a corporation, you cannot go, you know, you have
But Facebook makes money out of it.
Yeah, but
much
okay,
more than
but that's not the
anybody
model
else.
of IBM. We're not making money on data, okay? We don't commercialialize data.
What I meant is there's a mindset change, and we should recognize that
that's right, yeah.
in future healthcare development.
I would say there is a mindset change, even within the pharma industry. I mean, I know that the whole first part of the session sort of pointed to the fact that we need some sort of cultural shift within the pharma industry and the clinicians and even the public. But you are seeing things like Eli Lilly has a Twitter page for patients to interact and engage its clinicians. Eli Lilly is a stalwart in the industry, yet they have a Twitter page. You know, that's kind of unheard of for the industry, but you know, now you're gonna, like, Eli Lilly has one, so Pfizer's gonna have one, and AstraZeneca's gonna have one. You know, there is a bull rush to change once somebody kind of steps out. So I do think that we are gonna, the change is coming.
25 years back, when Human Genome came,
Yeah.
we spent hours together discussing confidentiality. 25 years down the road, everybody would say, my genome is up. Today, when I take a survey to collect old people whose genome they want to put it up, they all say yes. Everybody wants to share them. I don't know what change has taken place, but I'm sure Lee will agree. 25 years back, it was the biggest concern we had, that confidentiality, what will happen. But whether it's Watson genome or Craig Venter genome or every possible genome people have, and you have seen Angela, whatever has done, people just would like to. So there is a change, and that change is the hope of the transition that we have gone into a space of confidentiality to how do we share to make sure we get the care for the people. And that's, I think, is the mood we need to take. And technology is the base.
Okay, so one more comment.
Just one comment on what you said. I think.
Okay, three more comments, because this is yeah. So you, and you, and then I think we need to wrap up because people are hungry.
Just a very short comment. I think you're really right. This ecosystem, this sector in life sciences is maturing in what it is pre-competitive, and that needs to be shared. All pharma do not need to reproduce the same methods that are of use and that could be shared and leveraged, and then concentrate on what is really their intellectual property, which is their novel mechanism or their novel chemical or their novel biologics. But I agree with you, there is a mass of information that should be shared, and a mass of methodologies, models, simulations, ways of understanding how living systems behave, understand how they behave in a wellness state or in a disease state should be shared. And that's about publication, but publishing even more larger and agreeing on standards to exchange all this information that is available.
Thank you. So in rapid succession, the last three comments. You first, Lloyd, Dr. Lloyd.
I would just say I agree entirely that data should be shared. I think there's one central issue we really have to deal with, and that's discrimination. And that is much more of a severe issue in the States than in single-payer systems that you have here in Europe. But until that is really resolved, we can make all the beautiful arguments we want about getting the data out there, but people, I'll tell you, the question we got asked most often in the 107 Pioneer study was exactly that. How can you guarantee us that this data won't be used? And we de-anonymized it, and of course the issue is if you're really a clever hacker, you can identify data with people. So the real key is to make sure there isn't discrimination. After we've done that, I think we'll be in good shape.
I do think that there are some lessons in terms of bringing the public along with you, because as much as I understand, you can anonymize the data and, you know, it just goes in a cloud and you couldn't possibly, a public perception that their privacy is being compromised could derail the whole thing. And you know, the public doesn't always understand the science or the technology behind what's happening. So I do think there's a bit of a precariousness to the current period that we're in, and that we might do well to invest a little bit in educating our public about privacy issues and whatnot. So Diane wanted to make a very quick comment.
Yes, just a quick comment. I would like to come back to your comment. I agree with you. It's true that we see a very important cultural shift. And it's not just with the public, it's also with the whole pharma industry. It's a need. It's just a need. The diseases are so complex that there's no way we are going to solve these problems just alone. There's no way. And I think the pharma industry, most of it has understood that already. And personally, what I think would be extremely important is that we see this also from the academic point of view. I think we still have a little bit of work to do here. How can we make it to work together? Because there's no way we're going to find, one group is going to find a solution.
Ashley Wilmore has a train to catch. So I want to thank you very much for your participation. And Pascal has one last comment for us, and then I think we'll round out. I know we have 2 tweets on the board, but we're a bit over time, so yeah.
I didn't really have a comment. I mean, I understand your points. I think security and anonymization is a big issue. I think we are one of the companies that potentially have the capability to do the best. We can always certainly think better, so we need to see how that works. Just my comment is, I welcome any of your ideas about how to use Watson. Basically, I end my presentations about, okay, what would you do with Watson? And that's what I would like to hear from you, because I think it's a technology that has lots of capabilities, and we haven't really thought about all of them. So the door is open. Please come.
Thank you. Okay, well, I'm going to thank all the speakers for their participation, and I hope this was an enlightening session for everyone. I do think a cultural shift is coming, and I do think that the questions that can be asked and will be asked will inevitably improve healthcare through big data. And it's not just big data. Big data enables that more holistic view that perhaps the genomics age has detracted from in some way in the last 10, 15 years. So I think a move away from reductionism is a good thing. I think big data is enabling that, and I think we have some clear obstacles to overcome. However, knowing what we need to overcome is again the first step. And I believe we will be running soon. I believe IBM's running already and Dassault is running already. But you know, the disparity between industry and the public is always one that takes a bit of time for catching up. Thank you, everyone. I appreciate it.